us today, and I will turn the floor over to the Dominion team that is going to present to us today. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, and I'll kick it off on our team. Then I'll do a quick run robin here. And I know y'all probably have a lot of business today. I don't know if y'all are getting snow like we are here in Richmond, but I know we'll try and have a nice conversation this morning, and then go on with our day and have a good rest of our week. But my name's Jimmy. I'm with the Plus Communications team here in Richmond. I have a couple of my colleagues on as well today, Trace and Irene. And Amy, thanks for coordinating with us. I know we've been back and forth since I think before Christmas, trying to find a day that worked best. So I'm glad we could get something together with y'all and present. My team's been working with Steve and Jeannie and the Dominion team for about almost 18 months, 2 years now, on some just kind of high level outreach around transmission projects, and kind of what's been going on in that space in Northern Virginia, and kind of expanding out now to Culpeper, Fauquier, some other places as well. So what we'll go through today will be a kind of a high level overview. Steve and Jeannie will be on, and they can, they'll point out a couple more specific details as we get to kind of Culpeper specific projects a little bit down through our presentation. But that's my introduction. I'll kick it just to Steve and Jeannie real quick to, I think Jeannie's on, to give a quick intro, and then I'll share my screen if that's okay, Amy, here in a minute, and then we'll get rolling through our presentation.
Hey folks, Steve Precker here. I am the manager of electric transmission communications for Dominion Energy. I thought I saw some familiar faces as you were all gathering in the room, so good to see you all again. For those of you who have met and worked with in the past, and for those I'm just meeting for the first time, good morning. As Jimmy said, we're based here in Richmond, so I'll apologize in advance. We are having a little bit of an ice and snowstorm right now, so certainly it would make sense as we're here presenting on energy and Dominion Energy if my electric kicked out. So please do bear with me just in case the unexpected happens, and I'll also apologize in advance. It's prime breakfast and bluey time in my house right now for my 3-year-old. So if you hear any noise in the background, it's not me yelling about getting dressed. But I will turn it over to my colleague Jeannie from Government Affairs to introduce herself, and then Jimmy, we can kick it back to you.
I'm not sure. I can't tell if Jeannie's on. I know she was on. She might have gotten booted, but if she jumps back in, I know Amy, I know you guys have talked, so I'll kick her back to Jeannie if she hops on. I know she was on and hopped off, but I'll go ahead and try and share here, and then we'll get rolling. But thanks, Steve. All right, and then let me know what y'all see. Big presentation now. I always get never sure with Teams. Okay.
Got it.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us this morning. Again, we'll kind of go through kind of a high-level overview of what's been going on, big picture with Dominion in the transmission space, and what we're looking forward to the next couple of years here. And then we'll have a few examples about Culpeper. Then as we go through, if y'all have questions, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll try and answer them appropriately. But what we're kind of overviewing today is first looking at forces that are looking to drive infrastructure needs here in Northern Virginia and Culpeper and kind of the expanding counties around them. Obviously, first, for this group in particular, I think is economic growth. There's a lot of economic growth kind of expanding with some interest here from Amazon in recent years, some other big companies, but also just kind of data center growth and some other infrastructure that's kind of pouring into the area. Also, the power grid's aging. So just naturally, there needs to be upgrades to the infrastructure, to the power grid in order to meet reliability, ensure that we're able to continue meeting the region's needs for power demand going forward. And then lastly is kind of NERC standards. So the North American Electric Reliability Corporation does set the standards for the grid to make sure that it's secure, that it's reliable, and that people can continue to count on it going forward. And these investments need to be made and to ensure that standards are met into the future. Northern Virginia, and also kind of expanding a bit, into Culpeper now, is now home to over 23% of Virginia's overall population. It's fast growing. It's diverse. It has a lot of high interest in tech jobs and other jobs coming in. I think HQ2 even now with kind of the slowdown from COVID is still expected to bring over 25,000 jobs over the next decade to the region. It's immensely valuable, but also it does present some challenges in terms of infrastructure that we're working on planning for, reacting to, and making sure we're set up to deliver the power that's required and expected from Dominion in the years to come. Growing demand for electricity. I'll talk for a minute here, and then I'll point more specifically to kind of what these charts on the left here are. But kind of, growing demand for electricity is a challenge that needs to be met. Since 2019 alone, Dominion's connected nearly 100, and I wouldn't be surprised if that 100 number has been surpassed or soon to be surpassed here. Data centers to the grid, which is over 4,400 megawatts of additional capacity. Just for comparison, that's about equivalent to bringing 1.1 million residential homes onto the grid. A couple factors have kind of played into that growth. One is the number of data centers. Two, the size of these facilities. Just since 2019, the size of these facilities have kind of expanded. A lot of the times for a while, they were about 30 megawatts per facility. Now we're seeing some come in with requests for double that capacity for electricity, upwards of 60 megawatts per facility. And then also these facilities are also putting in an accelerated ramp up schedule where they're requesting to reach their full capacity sooner than they might have a couple of years ago. On the left here, you'll see we have kind of the last top 10 peak days have been within the last 7 months or within a 7-month period. These are kind of winter peaks, as you would expect, as well as summer peaks. But these kind of also play in here on the left, the PJM energy zone, which is what Dominion is a part of. They do an annual kind of projection every year just to kind of plot out where they expect growth will be, where demand will be, looking out over 10 years, just kind of for planning purposes. You'll see this purple line on the bottom was the 2022 annual forecast, and you'll see how we're kind of tracking with that blue line above that. We also subsequently have the 2023, 24, and 25 projections, and you can see how we're kind of trending along with that, but also kind of there's a big explosion around 27 where a lot of these data centers and other facilities are expected to come online.
And I'll just add to that slide too. One of the questions that we always get asked, whether it's by members of the public or certainly within the General Assembly, is the forecast real? Is what we're looking at actually going to occur? And this slide clearly shows that the answer is yes. The forecast is real. And as Jimmy said, it's no surprise that we're seeing these peak load growth numbers in winter and summer. Think really cold days in winter, everyone's turning their heat on, they're staying home more. Summer, air conditioning. So there's a lot of electricity that's being used on the grid, compounded by grid transformation, data centers, the onset of electric vehicles, a cleaner, the transition to cleaner energy. So all of that together, really tests the grid and shows just how much electricity we're using. Thanks, Jimmy.
Steve. Data centers, which I know we'll get to a bit more in specifics to Culpeper here in a few minutes, but the Northern Virginia data center market has generally included Loudoun and Prince William County in terms of most number of data centers, but that has expanded in recent years to Fairfax, Fauquier, Culpeper, Stafford, and I know some additional surrounding counties as well are beginning to get some proposals for data centers these days. They're not, like I mentioned earlier, they're not just growing in number, they're also growing in size, and they're also often upgrading their technology and the equipment within existing data centers these days to meet the demands of their clients and what they expect the data centers to be able to handle in terms of capacity, load, and just general performance. Again, these transmission upgrades play into making sure that we can handle the demand. We can look to future demand, and can address that appropriately. Strengthening the electric grid, which we've hit on a couple times, is a priority for Dominion. They've invested billions over the past decade, and that number is only expected to increase. You can see here the 2022 to 2026 investments in energy reliability compared to the prior 4 years and the prior 4 years before that. Long-term planning and investments are important, and they also ensure that the electric grid continues to be strong as it is right now. They are going to continue to be key as we're able to meet needs of customers. As you can see, these are kind of the capacity here where we have 6,800 miles of electric transmission lines, 57,000 miles of distribution lines. So there's a lot of infrastructure in place. A lot of it that needs to be upgraded, something needs to be added just to make the grid work better, more reliably, and handle changes in demand and weather events like we're having in part of Virginia today. This is just kind of a simple, generic illustration of how the grid connectivity works. When we're talking about projects like today, like in Culpeper and the surrounding area, we're focused on the transmission components and the substation components. So not the distribution lines and not kind of the generation that are often talked about, especially on the generation side, but just kind of the components of getting it from the generation to where it needs to be.
And one. Oh, sorry, it sounds like I have some feedback there. One tidbit that I always like to. Sorry, is anybody else getting our feedback?
We are hearing that. I'm not sure where it's coming from.
Now, Steve, I think you're muted now.
All right, sorry. You'd think that after a few years of Teams meetings and remote work, one would get used to learning how to use it. One tidbit that I always like to point out on this slide is 250 homes is the equivalent of 1 megawatt of energy. And why we like to point that out is, you hear Jimmy and myself, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later in the presentation about data centers. It's a good reference point to show just how much energy data centers use and why these grid transformation efforts that we're pursuing are so important. A few years ago, you had data centers that were basically capping their load at around 30 to 60 megawatts. Again, 1 megawatt can power 250 homes. So 30 to 60 megawatts at that time a few years ago was a lot of energy. Nowadays, we're seeing data centers that are upwards of 100 plus megawatts, right? We're seeing campuses with multiple data center buildings. That's per building, by the way. So we're seeing more and more load by these high energy customers coming onto the system, which does require us to put those significant investments into the electric transmission grid that Jimmy was just talking about to ensure that we're able to fulfill our legal obligation to power any customer that requests energy and keep the grid operating reliably and safely for everyone. Thanks, Jimmy.
Thanks, Steve. I will kick it here now. We'll go a bit to Culpeper, and I know Steve will jump in a bit too to on kind of just describing some of the lines. But we'll focus here on kind of the Culpeper Tech Zone, which has been put in place for some data center components as well. Which looking at a few upgrades to the system here. I know there's a 230 kilovolt transmission line that's being proposed, as well as 2 options for transmission lines to interconnect some new substations at the CTZ. On the map here. It's kind of an expanded view. In the next map we have coming up will be a little bit more zoomed in. You'll see kind of the purple lines running kind of not quite north-south that are kind of the transmission lines that are already existing. There's some lighter pink lines kind of shooting off of that are approved future transmission lines that have not yet been built. And then you'll see here kind of some proposed routes from this transmission line kind of running south here closer to Culpeper. And how that would get into town here. Steve, anything in particular on this map you want to highlight before I go to the zoomed in map?
Yeah.
Here?
Yeah, sure thing. So everybody, I'm presuming, is well familiar with the Culpeper Tech Zone project. This is the project that's driven by data center development within the town, as well as parts of the county. And what you're looking at here is one of the maps from the project that we are planning to file with the State Corporation Commission, an application with the State Corporation Commission to build this transmission infrastructure. We're planning to file that next month. So we had previously held 2 community meetings earlier this year at the beginning of January in the town, and then down in Orange County, where we'll also be having some network upgrades. And what you see here are basically options that we're looking at. The red line, as Jimmy said, does co-locate with the existing transmission line that runs west into the town of Culpeper. The yellow line just below that is an alternate option that we're proposing that is buildable. However, that's not our preferred option, and that's what we're planning to say in our application to the SCC. And it's not our preferred option because wherever we can co-locate with or adjacent to existing infrastructure, we do always look to meaningfully limit the impact of this new infrastructure on property owners, on local jurisdictions, from a visual perspective, things like that. So that's why in many of our projects like this one, you will see options. The SCC likes to see that we've done our due diligence in looking at all of the potential scenarios. So like I said, we do anticipate filing this project with the State Corporation Commission early next month. And from there, it typically takes anywhere between 8 and 12 months for the SCC to give its final order on whether or not they give us the thumbs up or ask us to go back to the drawing board. And we have a few more hyperlocal slides after this that we just kind of wanted to point out here. Jimmy, if you don't mind, I'll just continue going from
Yeah,
here.
no, go ahead, Steve. You can speak to it more eloquently than I can. Go ahead.
Sure. So here are a few other options that that we are evaluating as we get into the town of Culpeper, crossing the highway going across Germanna Community College's campus. And this is the Culpeper Tech Zone area that's been rezoned for data centers. And you'll see, I'll just call out, again, we have multiple options here as we get into the Culpeper Tech Zone. Our preferred option, again, is to continue with that co-location along the purple line. It will break off and run to, I guess you could say, the southwest for that one area of development just south of the highway, and then continue co-locating towards the town, breaking off into blue, and then that hashed line is our preferred option. The teal line that you see, again, is an alternate scenario that we're proposing that is constructible, but again, not our preferred approach here. So we've been working closely, certainly with the property owners as we come west into the town on our proposal to co-locate. We've been working closely with Germanna Community College on what the art of the possible is with co-locating for an additional 65 feet of right-of-way adjacent to the existing corridor. And those discussions are ongoing. They've been positive discussions. And we're eager to submit this to the SCC and continue working with all parties in the county, both from the public sector, private sector, government sector, to keep everyone aware of the progress and what we're evaluating. You want to go to the next?
Steve. And then some of you, I imagine some of y'all have been to some of these meetings before, but for those that not, these are kind of components that when we have open houses and project meetings, some things we want to make sure that we always emphasize and look at as we kind of have initial meetings with localities. Obviously, as Steve has emphasized, I know we've talked about a lot, is looking to review where existing right-of-ways are, if we can co-locate, if it's just a replacement with an existing right-of-way, and what the components are there. We look to engage property owners that we expect to be or could be impacted, to let them know about different routes, what we're looking at. We try and stay close to property boundaries. As Steve mentioned, we're looking, to co-locate here, and maybe add some additional adjacent right-of-way with Germana, but looking to collate that as close as possible. And then obviously looking to try and minimize any impacts to any cultural and environmental and historical concerns, which I know are paramount up in this part of Virginia. Again, just some additional key considerations here that go into all of these processes when we're looking at project routes and potential options. Conservation lands as well. I know from doing work up there that conservation, and there's a lot of historical sites that need to be reviewed and studied and taken into account, as well as public gathering spaces like Germanic Community College, and making sure that we're getting input from those stakeholders that utilize both that own the property, but also the ones that utilize that property for recreation and other events. This is just kind of some of the other things that we do in this space. Meetings like this. I know we have engagement groups. I know we do a lot of outreach with chambers, local community groups, HOAs where they have them, other just neighborhood groups, open houses. As Steve's mentioned, we've had 2 up there in Culpeper as well. I know that we'll continue to have more engagement with this Culpeper project as that continues to move forward with the State Corporation Commission process. And making sure we have continued dialogue as it goes along, so people are aware of what the project routes are, which ones ultimately get approved, and what construction timelines will look like once those have been approved. And then this is kind of an overview of the State Corporation Commission process that Steve has referenced. Again, timeline can be dependent on project size and scope. Anywhere from 8 to 12 to 24 months, depending on how large the project is. Kind of Dominion starting the process, and then kind of feedback loop with State Corporation Commission, opportunities for public comment, public input, consideration of different routes before a final determination is made, and Dominion can begin construction of the approved project. And just kind of to wrap up, as we kind of hit on, these are some of the components of why new infrastructure is needed to meet growing demand up in Northern Virginia, both for projects that are already existing and are coming online, and some ones that are going to come online further in the future, like up in Culpeper is looking to cultivate. Dominion looks at a large study area ahead of time to look at where new infrastructure might be feasible, figure out best route options in substation locations, trying to think ahead of the time, and before have some ideas before potential projects come into the pipeline. We look at a lot of options for community input, online, in person, virtual meetings, in-person meetings, one-on-one meetings. We try and do as much as we can to make sure that as many people are aware of what we're looking to potentially propose. And then again, looking ahead, it's reliability. We're in a good spot right now, but we know that we need to improve infrastructure reliability, in the near term, in order to ensure that reliability doesn't take a risk in years to come. And I'll share this deck with Amy as well, so she can share it with y'all, and y'all have it. These are some resources we have online where you can find all the power line projects, and it'll walk through project page. It'll have information of previous meetings, upcoming meetings, any resources that were available to the public, construction timelines. So you can go through and kind of figure out if maybe you missed a meeting, maybe you heard about a meeting that already happened. It just kind of serves as a source where you can look at that project and find out more. And also they have a really nice virtual open house that kind of walks you through the different components of what's at an open house if you haven't been to one. So if you're planning to go to one, you can kind of click through that and see what you'll expect to hear, what kind of things will be presented, and kind of give you a good sense of kind of how these meetings will run on our end. That's the wrap on the presentation. Let me.
Happy to take any questions.
If y'all have any questions before, I know you'll have probably other business meetings agendas to get to, but we'll kick it open for any other questions either now, or y'all can follow up with us, and I'll make sure that Amy has our contact info. And I know Jeannie's been in contact and I know we'll continue to be in contact over the next couple of weeks and months as the Culpeper project progresses.
Any questions?
Yes, good morning. Thank you too, gentlemen, Tony Troilo. In development of distribution lines and transmission lines, with going through new property, do you ever have to end up in eminent domain, or do you work around that, or do you? Because the land or the homeowner, well, the landowner actually could say, no, I don't want you coming through here. What ultimately happens there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So to be clear, eminent domain, yes, it is a legal tool that we have available to us, but that is by far not the first or preferred method that we ever look to pursue. We look whenever it's a new routing project or a new transmission line project, we do look to work closely with those property owners. If we get a property owner that's just simply completely resistant, if there are opportunities to route elsewhere or mitigate impacts to that particular property, we do look to evaluate those. I will say that more often than not, we do reach consensus with property owners. It's certainly a negotiation where property owners are compensated for easements on their land. So, eminent domain is definitely not one of those things that we like to pursue or even pursue, as it generally results in agreements with property owners.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I would just add, I'm Neil Dean. I'm with the schools, the local schools here. I know you mentioned Germanna campus where you would come across, just right across the street is a school as well. So it's two campuses right there. Just as a friendly reminder, we have a career technical school right there as well. So I would just remind you of that. And what, yeah, I don't know if you mentioned this or not, I missed it, but what timeline are we looking at for this whole approval process?
Yeah. So we're looking to submit an application for this project to the State Corporation Commission early next month. From there, it can take anywhere from 8 to 12 months, thereabouts, for the SCC to review and issue its final order on approving construction. After we get that final order, generally a few months down the road, we'd begin construction. So we're probably looking at sometime in the summer of 2026 is when we would anticipate construction beginning for this, should it be approved by the SCC. There may be some pre-work in terms of things like surveying activities, soil borings to check the condition of the soil as we prepare to put foundations in the ground. So I would anticipate that late spring, you might start seeing some activity, again, pending SCC approval, with construction beginning sometime next summer, summer 2026. Before anything happens, we'll be back in touch with community members, Town of Culpeper, County of Culpeper, to let everyone know what the schedule looks like. Typically, we hold pre-construction community meetings. So folks are aware of what to expect, what the final SCC order allows for us to build, what the final engineering design will look like, and subsequent schedule.
And their contractors also have been, we already have 115 that's getting upgraded to a 230. That'll be happening prior to this project. Their contractors have already contacted and been in contact with CTEC about potential employment opportunities, and just ways they can partner as they're going through this process, which they're also on the Germanna line, which is the AWS line, doing the same. So their contractors have been very proactive, even though that first project's not quite yet in construction.
And how long does construction take? I guess just curious on the backside.
Yeah, it It depends on the type of project that it is, the mileage, the conditions of the ground once we get out there. A good example, so Brian just mentioned the Germana project line, which is the AWS line, and that one is to the east of that existing transmission corridor up in Stevensburg that I'm sure you're all familiar with. So we received the SCC final order for that line in the fall of last year. We're currently out in the field surveying, doing some soil borings with an anticipated energization date. So construction complete, line in service, providing electricity to that data center in late spring 2026. So that line is just under 2 miles long. And from final order issuance to energization date, it's about a year and a half.
Steve, how many of these projects, obviously these are ones that are important to us here in Culpeper County, but how many of these projects are currently ongoing throughout the Commonwealth?
Oh gosh, many, many projects. Candidly, I don't have a number right off the top of my head, but it's certainly 100 plus. And that ranges from different level projects, right? It ranges from new transmission lines and new substations, uprates of existing transmission lines. So we have a lot of transmission lines that are still operating at 115 kilovolts. We may need to upgrade those to 230 kV to support that growing electricity need. We have projects that are what we call grid interconnection projects, and those interconnect new generation sources onto the electric transmission grid. For example, any type of new solar or battery storage projects. We're building coastal Virginia offshore wind, 27 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach. That's 170 wind turbines that'll provide enough power for 660,000 homes. We're doing a lot of work in eastern Virginia off of Virginia Beach and coming further west on land to interconnect that new generation source as it's being constructed. One of the things that we're seeing with many of these projects, so as Jimmy noted, the data center boom has really started in extreme Northern Virginia, right? Extreme compared to where Culpeper is, but Loudoun County, Prince William County. We're even seeing some in Arlington and Fairfax now. And that's really where these things have been concentrated so far. But we're seeing more and more that migration of the data center industry moving south down the I-95 corridor, moving southwest into counties like Fauquier, into counties like Culpeper. We're seeing data centers booming down in Mecklenburg County and the south side of Virginia. And like I said before, all of that compared with just the changing technology environment that we're all facing with the introduction of AI, with electric vehicles coming onto the system. And again, even with the cleaner sources of energy and that transition to green energy, that does require us to make those network upgrades. So there are a lot of projects happening across the Commonwealth to keep that grid, which the grid is interconnected, and I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but it's important to note that a lot of what we hear in communities is, well, why are you doing this here? We don't have any data centers here. We don't have any, new projects or anything that we can perceptibly see as a need for this. And many times that's because there is existing infrastructure in those areas and the grid is connected. Power flows in all directions. We're not taking power from an area and sending it to another area at the expense of that area. It flows in all directions. There's no one generation source that powers a specific area. We get asked that a lot when we host our community meetings. Where is my power coming from? In Culpeper, you all have power coming from North Anna Nuclear Station, Surrey Nuclear Station down in the Hampton Road, Newport News area. You have Ladysmith combustion turbine plant off of 95. Again, we're constructing CVAS. So all of that is going to feed into the generator that's providing power onto the grid as a whole. So that was a very long answer to your question, but I hope it kind of paints the picture of everything that's going on.
No, and you answered my next question, which was gonna be is where's all the power coming from? So way to be in my brain and understand that. So thank you.
All right, Steve, could you talk about the recent news of Dominion expanding capacity, power generation capacity?
Yeah. So, it's no surprise again that the rapid and increased load growth as a result of everything that I've previously mentioned, we do need more generation for that. And that's something that we're always looking at. So, what we're doing in terms of building new generation sources, CVOW, we're building a new natural gas generation station in Chesterfield County, Virginia. We need to ensure that we have that generation capacity to continue to feed the power needs all across the Commonwealth. One of the tools that we use to look ahead into the future at what those needs are 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road. We have what we release every year. It's called an integrated resource plan, or an IRP. And that really shows the generation mix that we need to rely on to keep the system operating reliably. So when you expect to flip that switch, your lights turn on. And that generation mix is truly a mix. We're still committed to the transition to clean energy and carbon-free energy, particularly as it relates to the Virginia Clean Economy Act. But we can't just stop all previous fossil fuel sources of energy right now and solely focus on solar and wind and nuclear, which are certainly a large and increasing mix of our energy generation. But we do still need to leverage those existing sources, such as natural gas, and increasingly less, but still somewhat of the mix. There are still some coal-fired plants. I think it's less than 10% of the generation mix. But we're taking less plants offline now in order to keep us operating at the level that everyone expects.
Any further questions? All right. Not hearing any. Jimmy, Stephen, team, thank you so very much for coming and speaking with us today. This was enlightening, no pun intended. And I thought that you guys did an incredible job. We're able to put it into understanding that I could comprehend. So thank you so much. Amy, if you please get the PowerPoints to Amy, and Amy will share them out with the group so we can take a look at them in the future. But thank you, Jimmy, Stephen, everybody, once again for a job well done. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. We love to talk about these things, and please let us know if you have any questions. Happy to answer anything that pops into your head after the fact, and hope everyone stays safe. I think you're getting a little bit less winter weather now than originally predicted, but stay safe, stay warm, and have a great Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
All right, so we still have about a little over 15 minutes, so we'll quickly go around the room. Let everybody know what's going on in all of our organizations. Chris?
Sure, just real quickly.